Hello guys, welcome to the second lecture for Cursor AI for advanced users, and in this video we'll talk about how code-based indexing works, and we'll also talk about some advanced context setup in Cursor so that it can give you some better output as an AI. Okay, so let's move ahead. So in this, let's quickly discuss the overview for this video. So context is what makes AI useful. Okay, we provide that, okay, these are the set of files in which you have to make changes, or we kind of tell that, okay, do this thing, take the scope from here. This is what we call as context. Okay, context is what makes AI useful. If we don't provide much context or keep the prompt very generic, then what happens is even the best model just try to guess the output, and the output is something that you might not want, right? So to provide or to get better output from the AI, you have to be good at providing better context or providing better prompts. Cursor builds and uses project-wide understanding through indexing. We'll understand like how Cursor does this code-based indexing and how is it able to provide us the output so faster. How is it able to provide the output so faster using the code-based indexing? Okay, so it doesn't take your code all the time to generate the output for a new feature. It actually uses something called as indexing, your code-based indexing. We'll talk about that. Okay. Ahref lets us direct the AI's attention to the right files or symbols. We'll talk about what Ahref in Cursor means. Together, they turn Cursor from a helper into a true engineering partner. Okay, so this is what happens with this indexing and all those things. Cursor, from just guessing, if we provide a simple prompt, it tries to guess and generate the output for that. With this indexing and all, it gives you a more clear output. That is something that you are looking for. Okay, so let's move ahead. So let's understand what code-based indexing means. Okay, when you open a folder inside Cursor, Cursor starts scanning your entire project automatically. It doesn't just read file names, it parses code structure, which we call as abstract syntax tree, AST. Okay, builds a semantic map. For example, what functions are there in which files. Well, then it kind of builds a relationship also that, hey, this function in this file is called by a function in other file. So it kind of builds a relationship among all those things. Okay, and then it also knows dependencies as well, like what kind of dependencies are being used in this file, what kind of dependencies are being used in this file. So based on that, it kinds of build this connections, or basically a graph of all the relationship across different files. What does this AST means, right? Abstract syntax tree. So whenever we open a folder, Cursor starts scanning it, right? For each file, it parses the code structure and creates this abstract syntax tree. Let me give a quick example of what does this abstract syntax tree looks like. For example, you can see here that this is the file add.ts. Let's imagine that there is a file called as add.ts and it has a function add which takes two parameters a and b. And this is what the abstract syntax tree for that file looks like. Like this is the file name and it has this function. So what Cursor does is it takes all such files, create their abstract syntax tree. From their abstract syntax tree for each of the file, it kind of does this symbol identification. What symbol identification means is basically it creates a catalog of all the functions, classes, constants and imports, etc. And what happens here is it kind of knows that, hey, this function here at symbol identification, it kind of tells us that, hey, this function is used in this file, this function is used in this file, and all those things, right? And finally, from this catalog, it kind of builds this connections. Connections means basically, for example, if there is a function called as send payment, right? So basically collect payment or something like that, right? So in that case, what happens is collect payment is one function. Basically, it communicates with the banking provider. So that could be one function. So this relationship, this connections or this graph is kind of the output or the index of your code base is something that it looks like that. Now, what is the significance of this? Okay, let's talk about that. So we have done this, we have built this connections, and basically this is also called as some embeddings or metadata of your code base. Okay, your code base is not stored, but instead this structure is kind of stored with the Cursor. Okay. Now what happens is, let's say we ask a question or give a prompt, right? So what will happen is Cursor converts your prompt into a vector. Let's not think about a vector, but let's just understand that vector is kind of some numerical value that or something like that. It converts a prompt into a vector and it looks at these embeddings for the most semantically related file snippets. Okay. So basically based on your prompt, it tries to find out what's the intent behind this prompt, right? and it kind of converts it into something that these embeddings are actually made of. Okay, and finally from these embeddings it will tell, okay, this guy is trying to build the auth feature, and these are the kind of files where he has to make those changes in. Okay, now think of it like that, right? Your entire code base is not stored on the cursor server or with the LLMs. It's just that these embeddings are kind of stored with the cursor. Okay, and then finally what happens, it just tells that, hey, these are the files and these are the snippets that you have to make modifications in your code base, and then cursor does that, right? Now what happened is my code was never stored with cursor. If I'm using privacy mode, my code will never be stored with cursor, and this is how it actually works, and this is how it actually tries to generate code for a given feature on your code base using this architecture. Okay, it uses those as context for the LLM, right? Because these embeddings and all those things, it kind of it shares it with the LLM, which is working behind the scene to generate the code for you. Actually, at the end of the day, it's the LLMs that are generating the code for you, right? So these LLMs take these things and it kind of generates the output or the code for you accordingly. Okay, so this was the basic code base indexing that Cursor does at a very high level. You can read about it in more depth, like what embeddings are, how the vectors work, but this is enough for us and even enough for interviews as well. Okay, now we're going to talk about one important thing called as cursor ignore file. So what we can do is, let me quickly go to Cursor. I'll open a new project. Right, then I'll on my desktop or anywhere you want, I will create a new folder. I'll call this cursor indexing, and I'll call this examples. Okay, so I'll create this directory and I'll open it inside Cursor. So this is the first step that you should do. You should also always create a new folder for working with the new project, or if you already have a project, just open the directory inside Cursor so that Cursor starts indexing it. How do we know that Cursor is indexing these things? You can go to settings. Inside settings, you will see here indexing and docs. This is where you can see all the indexing parts. For example, Codebase indexing, for this it is 100% done. And these are the few options. We are not going to go there, but this is how the indexing works in Cursor. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, when I'm going to create let's say a new file, test.js, and we are just going to say to Cursor, in my file test.js, generate a function to add, subtract, divide and multiply two numbers. Generate functions, not a function, generate functions. Okay, so we have provided a context to the Cursor using this @ref. This is what @ref means. You can use @ and then you can provide the exact file, so the Cursor knows that, hey, this is the file where it has to make all the changes that we're kind of asking them through prompt, and it has done this inside test.js, right? So I'll just keep it. Right, so this is what how you can use the @ref part. We also have a thing called as cursor ignore file. So this cursor ignore file is actually if you had git installed here, right? So then what happens is cursor ignore file automatically inherits all the git ignore files that we have inside that. Okay. The important thing that we have to understand about the cursor ignore file is that if you have put, let's say, this test.js inside the cursor ignore, then what will happen is Cursor will not index this file like we used to say earlier, right? That how the code base indexing works in Cursor. It will not take those files as part of the code base indexing. So this is what cursor ignore stands for. What I'm going to do is just put cursor ignore, and its format is basically the same as the git ignore only. Not going to do much here. Let's go back and let's move to basically it is not used for indexing. It inherits the git ignore file. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the href, and this is how we can provide more context to the Cursor that, hey, do changes here, or look at these files and then try to make those changes. Okay, so we'll do it for a single file, we'll do it for multiple file, we'll do it for function in file, and at the end of the day, we'll also look at web. Web basically means we can do something like this, right? So what I can do is I can just add a new prompt here. Let me show you. I can make use of something I call as web. Web basically means go to the internet, find the information around this something, and then make changes here. Okay, so what we're going to do is, we're not going to do much, but let me just delete this file Let me delete, actually let the cursor ignore here, let me delete this file, and yes, move to trash. Then what I'm going to do is we are going to go to how we have seen in the last video, right, that we can use cursor rules to define how my project should be structured or built, or for any, what could be the architecture conventions and all. So we're going to take that. So we're going to go to cursor rules. Let's go there, and cursor directory. And here we're going to search for Next.js, right? So we'll try to set up a Next.js project. Let's do that. So Next.js has come. Next.js, this looks good to me, front-end developer. So I'll take that and I'll copy this, right? And how do we provide this as rules for this project? You can go to settings, then inside settings you go to rules and memories, and inside that add rule for your project, and we'll say project rules, right? And inside this I'll just paste this, right? So this is, let's quickly read a bit about it. So you are a senior front-end developer and expert in React.js, Next.js, JavaScript, TypeScript, HTML, CSS, and this. You are thoughtful, give nuanced answers, and are brilliant and reasoning. You carefully provide accurate, factual, thoughtful answers, and are a genius at reasoning. So basically, it kind of, sometimes what happens is cursor tries to generate all the output in just one file, right? This is kind of telling the cursor that, hey, you have to be like a good front-end developer or a senior front-end developer, and then think about it, reason about it, and then give me the output for that. So this is the prompt, kind of a prompt along with your prompt that you are trying to give to build something to cursor, and then thinks about that, right? So, okay. So now that we have done this, what we're going to do is we are going to just close this, and we have some settings here also. Always apply, and apply intelligently is basically cursor sees your prompts and then tries to sometimes apply these rules intelligently, and or you can use apply to specific files or apply manually. Most of the time I always use either always apply or apply intelligently. These two are enough. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to just close this. So we have the repo rules set up. I can close the settings as well. I can close the cursor ignore as well. What I'm going to do is say to cursor is let's set up a Next.js project, and also add Tailwind CSS as configuration. Now imagine this, when we added this prompt, right, what actually happened is along with these rules and this prompt is kind of went to the cursor, right? So now imagine that you didn't have to write all these rules in this prompt. Cursor kind of took it from here, and it knows that, hey, it wants to set up me, it wants me to set up this Next.js project, assuming that cursor is a senior front-end developer. So this is the benefit of rules and all. Okay, so what I'm going to say is we are going to just press enter, and let's close this, and let's see what cursor does. Okay, so cursor has come up with these to-dos: scaffolding the Next.js TypeScript app in web directory, ensure Tailwind CSS is installed and configured. These are the to-dos that cursor has planned for us. Update homepage to verify Tailwind styles frontend. So it looks good to me. I'll just say, yeah, run this. And these are the things it is doing. So let it do, fine. So it looks like cursor is doing this front-end setup and all inside a web directory inside my cursor indexing example. So this looks fine to me. I'm okay with that you can, yes, generate this Next.js project inside this web directory. Okay, so let cursor do its stuff. It is installing these dependencies that are required for the Next.js project. Okay, so it looks like the cursor is done here. So I'm going to just say, let's start the app, and we can provide more context here that since it has created my front-end project inside the web. So I'll say, let's start the app inside at web. Oh, this is interesting. Like at web is basically going to the browser, but you want to run the app inside this web directory. So I'm going to say at web. Let's see. No, it doesn't provide that. So we'll say, let's start the app inside the web directory. This is fine. Okay, so let's see what cursor does now. Okay, so cursor has analyzed my prompt, and it wants to go to this web directory, which is this directory, and wants to run this npm run dev. So I'll say just run, and let's see if our Tailwind is also configured correctly. So dev server launch in background from web, open this URL to view the app. So I'll just copy this URL and go to web and let's paste it here. And is it running? And yes, it is running, and looks like Tailwind is also configured properly. And the way I can say that is if I go to page.tsx is basically the entry point for Next.js app. If I go here, I can see this classes. These are Tailwind classes, Tailwind utility classes, right? You don't have to know this, but you can just read like 15 to 20 minutes on Tailwind. You will know what I'm trying to say here. Okay, so this is done, and we have learned about passing a single file reference and making those changes there. Now what I'm going to do is inside this page.tsx, I'm going to say that, hey, instead of this, remove everything and build a calculator that can take two numbers, add them, subtract them, divide them, or multiply them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this and just provide page.tsx, remove everything, and instead make a calculator that takes two numbers and a drop down which provides four options: add, subtract, multiply, divide, right? And a calculate button that when pressed shows the output of the two numbers and the operation as a tooltip. Okay, so this is what I just want, so I'll just say this. So let's see what cursor does here now. So I'm providing this add page.tsx as a context so that cursor knows that, hey, this guy wants to make changes in this file. Okay, so now it's planning the next moves. Let's see. So it has made the changes in this page.tsx file. So I'll just say, okay, keep it. But I would have wanted not to do this in page.tsx, but instead a different calculator file. But that's fine. Let's go ahead with this for now. We'll say keep, and so looks like it is done. So if I go back, and yeah, we have the calculator here. So I'll just press 100 and 800 and add is selected. We have the four options. That is good. So I'm just going to say calculate and add 100 and 800 is equal to 900. Okay, so this looks good. So calculate is done, but I'm going to just say that, hey, not here, but create a new component calculator and put all the calculator logic from add page.tsx to the calculator component and import that component inside page.tsx. Okay, so what I'm saying is just create a new component calculator. Note, don't dirty my page.tsx page. That's it. So let's see what it does. Okay, so looks like our component is created inside the calculator. We can keep it, right? So these are the changes. So now it's gonna, I think, refactor the things inside from page.tsx. And look at the main page, right? Our main page has this looks so neat. So and the calculator component is also created. So all the tasks are done, and we can just go back and it should work as the same. This is very interesting, right? So now we can go back, and what you can do is maybe these functions, I think that maybe we can put it to a or basically this handle calculate logic. Basically I can put it into a different file, something like a utils file. So what I'm going to say is let's select this. Please move the handle calculate, or you can provide at as here so that it understand, and it does understand, right? Handle calculate from calculator to tsx. So this is fine. So please put this handle calculate function in a utils file, because it looks very doesn't have to be part of a component, right? It can be imported from a utils file. In a utils files, and import it inside calculator.tsx and use that. Okay, so let's do that. So we are saying that all the logic that we have inside the handle calculate, put it into a utils file and import it inside calculate tsx and use that. So let's see what cursor does. So basically what I'm trying to do, so that this function can be put into a separate file, and that file can be tested. So we can check that whether we are able to write test also for files that doesn't have any component. Okay, so let's see. So create utils function for calculator logic, refactor calculate tsx to use utils handle calculate. Let's see. So it has calculated calculate.tsx ts, which is inside this, and this looks good. So let's keep this, right, and go to next one. Let's keep this. So basically now what has happened is this calculation result is coming from this file, right? And our component is also looks much neater. Earlier this function was really big, right? So this is done, and what we're going to do is this looks fine, and I think the logic still works, right? So let's just check it, 100, 200, and let's calculate this. And yeah, the logic still works. And the good thing is we have refactored this to a new file. Okay, so this is what we're trying to see here is using the href a lot, so that our AI generates output much faster. Okay, so this is done. Now what we're going to do is we are going to say that, hey, for this file at utils dot this, and utils, not utils actually, at calculate, we want to generate some test for it. Please generate test for the functions in this file. So what we are saying, we are asking cursor to kind of generate test cases for this function for different first value, second value, and for this different operations. So it is using ytest, which is fine by me, and it will create test for build calculation result. That is also fine, and then we can run those tests to suit to understand like if all the things are passing or not. So we'll just say run, and this is no matches found. Okay, let try more, and this time it was success. So it is creating some, it is basically doing the test setup for us. Okay, so we'll just say run. Let's install these libraries. So it has returned a test for us. We can see it here. These are the different test cases it has built for us. So I can just say keep, and we'll just say run, and this is the how you can run the test cases as well. Test files 1, tests 3. So what we have done is we have been able to write test for a specific file using ytest, which cursor determined for us, or you could have specified a different library as well, and it has returned the test cases for us as well, right? So this is very good, and if you want, you could have added more test here. That is also works, but for now this works for me. Okay, so this is there. Now we wanted to use our at web thing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to calculate a component, and what I look like is this. These and all are fine, but this doesn't have any accessibility part, right? So what I'm going to do is at calculator.tsx. Or actually what I'm going to say is please go to web and look for accessibility guidelines and make the component at calculator tsx more accessible to everyone, right? Accessibility is basically your component should be accessible to everyone. So for example, we can actually see these things, right? But not everyone can see this. Some need some other help as well, and this is where the accessibility comes in, right? So I'm going to just say this, hey, please go to web. So it's actually going to go to internet and find all the accessibility guidelines and apply this in our calculator component. Okay, so let's see what it does. So it's kind of saying that, hey, we can do these kind of things. It's area dashed, all those tags are kind of more accessible to the screen readers or to people who cannot easily perceive what is in front of them. So for them this area kind of attributes are useful. Okay, so I'll just say keep, or actually you can use this as well to keep all of them. And you can see here area described by, right? So whenever they press tab on it, and then what happens is there is a voice kind of a thing, and then it plays so that people who can't see the screen and all, they get a good feedback about like what they are viewing on the website. Okay, so this is what we use the web thing as well. And that is it actually. So this is how you can use href to do all kinds of stuff. They are not just web and all, but you can see all those things like git, rules, even terminals and everything, right? We have been using this in our beginners course as well and in this course as well. Okay guys, so that's it for this video. And what you can do is you can play around with this href, use some other rules as well that we have here, like different rules, play around with different projects like game development or web development, and try building some projects. Okay, so that is it for this video. I'll see you very soon. Bye.